Logan Weston adjusted his tie with a practiced hand, staring into the mirror mounted on the wall of the hallway. His reflection was familiar, but the man gazing back at him seemed somehow older, worn down by the unrelenting stress of the last few weeks. He could faintly hear Melissa, his wife, humming from the kitchen. Her voice was soft and lilting, almost like a distant echo, blending with the faint rustle of tarot cards sliding against one another. That sound had become as much a part of their home as the creak of the stairs or the hum of the fridge. The tarot cards. He'd never thought much of them when Melissa first brought a deck home from her wellness retreat. It had seemed harmless, even charming in its way. She had spent hours learning about the symbols, poring over guidebooks, and laughing with him when a reading revealed a mysterious stranger would alter her life. At first, he'd even asked for his own readings out of curiosity. It was fun, silly, until it wasn't. 3 weeks ago, Melissa's hobby had morphed into something Logan no longer recognized. She stopped sharing her readings with him, and her questions to the cards had become private, muttered under her breath. Sage and incense, which she used sparingly before, now burned in her study for hours on end, filling the house with a thick, cloying scent. When Logan mentioned that the smoke was giving him headaches, she'd waved him off as though the discomfort wasn't worth addressing. The change in her was subtle at first, but like a vine creeping through a crack in the wall, it grew more invasive over time. Logan finally walked into the kitchen, steeling himself. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Melissa sat at the table, the familiar deck spread out in a fan before her. Her blonde hair, once worn loose and tumbling past her shoulders, was now pinned in an intricate braid that somehow gave her an otherworldly air. She was shuffling the cards with a practiced precision that suggested hours of focus. When she looked up at him, her blue eyes were bright but distant, as though part of her was somewhere else entirely. "Morning," she said, her tone light, her voice sing-songy. The card said today would be transformative. Logan raised an eyebrow, the corners of his mouth twitching as he suppressed a sarcastic retort. Transformative how? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed a card down, its intricate design catching the light. The High Priestess stared back at them, serene and enigmatic. "They said I need to align with the universe," Melissa said, her voice softer now, almost reverent. "I've been asking important questions. And they've given me clarity." Logan lowered himself into the chair across from her, resting his elbows on the table. He looked at her seriously, trying to pierce the veil of mysticism she seemed to be wrapping herself in. "Clarity about what, exactly?" Melissa hesitated, her fingers dancing over the spread as though arranging an unseen puzzle. Finally, she met his gaze, and the intensity in her eyes sent a chill down Logan's spine. "That I need to stop holding myself back," she said, her voice resolute. "To stop clinging to what society tells me is right. To be free." Logan felt his stomach tighten. "Holding yourself back from what?" Melissa exhaled as though steeling herself. "From connections. From energy. From letting myself experience the fullness of life." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Logan's jaw clenched as he tried to control his rising frustration. "Melissa, what does that mean? Say it plainly." Her voice didn't falter, but there was a tremor of defiance in her tone. "It means that the cards are guiding me to explore my spirit, my energy, with others." Logan blinked, the blood draining from his face. "Others? As in other people? Other men?" "It's not about romantic connection," she said quickly, her voice defensive but still measured. "It's about spiritual freedom. About aligning myself with the universe's energy." "You wouldn't understand." Logan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor. "You're damn right I don't understand. You're saying the cards are telling you to cheat on me?" "Don't call it that," she snapped, her composure cracking for the first time. "This isn't about betrayal, Logan. It's about liberation." Logan paced to the counter, his hands gripping the edge as he tried to process what she was saying. The anger bubbling beneath his skin threatened to erupt, but his disbelief kept it at bay, for now. "You're using a deck of cards to justify tearing our marriage apart," he said, his voice low and hard. "That's not liberation, Melissa. That's insanity." Her chair creaked as she stood, her arms crossed defensively. "I don't expect you to get it," she said coldly. You've always been so grounded. But I can't let that keep me trapped anymore. The cards have shown me the truth. And if you can't accept that, maybe you don't know who I really am." Her words sliced through him like a blade. Logan turned to look at her, his vision blurring with the fury and hurt surging through him. "I married a woman, Melissa. Not a witch." Her laughter was sharp and bitter. "Maybe that's exactly what I am," she said, her tone challenging. "Maybe it's time I embraced it." They stood facing each other, the chasm between them widening with every second. Logan's mind raced, replaying every moment of their years together. Was this the same woman he'd fallen in love with? The same woman who cried with him during their wedding vows, who dreamed with him about growing old together? Or was this, whatever she was becoming, always lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge? The tension was suffocating. Finally, Logan shook his head, his voice trembling. "Melissa, I don't know what's happening to you. But if this," he gestured toward the cards, "the incense, the dimly lit study where she spent so much of her time, is more important than us, then I don't know what we're doing anymore." Melissa didn't answer. Instead, she picked up the cards, shuffling them with a calmness that belied the storm in the room. She flipped one over, a figure standing at the edge of a cliff, their arms open wide. "The Fool. The cards will guide me," she said softly, almost to herself. "They've never been wrong." Logan's chest ached with a pain he hadn't felt in years. Without another word, he grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door. As it slammed shut behind him, he thought he heard Melissa whisper something, but he didn't turn back. He couldn't. Logan Weston stared at the dashboard of his car, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The suburban street outside his home was bathed in the fading glow of twilight, the world around him peaceful and still. But inside Logan, a storm churned. He hadn't driven away after leaving the house. Instead, he sat there, his mind replaying Melissa's words over and over. "The cards will guide me." It wasn't just the words themselves but the conviction in her voice that unnerved him. She truly believed what she was saying. She believed the cards were right. The wife he thought he knew, the life he thought they were building together, felt like it was unraveling right before his eyes. And he was powerless to stop it. For the first time since this nightmare began, Logan considered the possibility that Melissa wasn't just playing with tarot cards, she might be losing her grip on reality. He let out a shaky breath, rubbing his temples. The soft buzz of his phone pulled him from his spiraling thoughts. Fishing it out of his pocket, he frowned at the screen. A message from Ethan, their next-door neighbor. "Hey, Logan. Just wanted to check in. Everything okay? Melissa's been acting different lately." Logan stared at the message, his stomach sinking. Ethan was the last person Logan wanted to hear from right now. The two men had a casual friendship, grilling burgers in the summer, sharing beers during football season, but lately, Ethan's presence had started to grate on Logan's nerves. The way Melissa lit up whenever Ethan was around, the inside jokes they shared, it had all started to feel too familiar. Too close. He shoved the phone back into his pocket, unwilling to respond. Not now. Maybe not ever. He needed to clear his head, to figure out what he was going to do. Instead of driving to nowhere, he decided to park a few streets away and walk. The cool evening air might help settle the chaos inside him. When Logan finally returned home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The faint smell of incense lingered in the air, and he felt a flare of irritation. Melissa had promised she'd keep it contained to her study, but clearly, promises didn't mean much to her these days. "Melissa," he called out, his voice echoing through the dimly lit hallway. No answer. He moved toward the study, a sense of unease growing with every step. The door was ajar, and he pushed it open, his pulse quickening. The room was empty, the tarot cards neatly stacked on the desk. A small glass bowl on the windowsill still smoldered, tendrils of sage smoke curling into the air. Logan's eyes caught something strange, 3 cards laid out in a row on the desk, facing the chair where Melissa usually sat. The cards seemed deliberate, as though they were left there for him. Against his better judgment, he stepped closer, his eyes scanning the images. The Devil. The Lovers. The Tower. Logan felt a shiver run down his spine. He wasn't well versed in tarot, but even he could sense the foreboding in those cards. The devil, with its chains and temptation. The lovers, suggesting intimacy, but also choice. And the tower, a scene of chaos and destruction, lightning splitting a fortress as figures fell to their doom. "What the hell are you trying to tell me, Melissa?" he muttered, his voice rough. Before he could dwell on it further, the sound of the front door opening and closing reached his ears. He moved quickly, stepping into the hallway just as Melissa appeared at the end of it. She was carrying a paper bag, her face flushed as though she'd been running. She froze when she saw him. "You're home," she said, her tone neutral, almost guarded. Logan crossed his arms, studying her. "Where were you?" "Grocery store," she said quickly, holding up the bag as if it were evidence. "We were out of milk." Logan frowned. Melissa hated grocery shopping, especially at night. Something about her answer didn't sit right with him. "At this hour?" She shrugged, brushing past him toward the kitchen. "It's quieter this time of night. Fewer lines." He followed her, watching as she began unpacking the bag. A carton of milk. A loaf of bread. A bottle of wine. Normal enough, but Logan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Did you go anywhere else?" he pressed, leaning against the counter. Melissa paused, her back to him. "What's with the interrogation, Logan?" "I ran an errand. That's all." "An errand," he repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Then why does Ethan think you've been acting strange?" Her shoulders stiffened. Slowly, she turned to face him, her expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "Ethan? What does he have to do with anything?" Logan hesitated, watching her closely. He couldn't tell if she was genuinely surprised or just a good actress. "He messaged me earlier," Logan said finally. "Asked if everything was okay with you. Said you've been different." Melissa's eyes narrowed, a flicker of anger crossing her face. "Ethan needs to mind his own business." "Does he?" Logan shot back, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Because lately, it seems like he knows more about you than I do." Her jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Then tell me, Melissa. What's going on with you? What are these cards really telling you? Because this isn't about enlightenment, or spiritual growth, or whatever excuse you want to use. This is about you pushing me away." Melissa's face flushed with anger, but her voice was calm, almost eerily so. "I don't have to explain myself to you, Logan. You don't understand what I'm going through." "Then make me understand," he shouted, his voice echoing in the kitchen. "Because right now, all I see is my wife slipping away into some delusion. Do you even hear yourself? The cards are telling you to be with other men. To destroy our marriage. What's next, Melissa? What's the endgame here?" Her eyes glittered with unshed tears, but she didn't break. Instead, she picked up the bottle of wine from the counter and turned away, her voice cold. "You want the truth, Logan? You're holding me back. The cards have shown me what I'm capable of, what I deserve. And if you can't accept that, then maybe it's you who doesn't belong here." Logan stared at her, his heart pounding. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he turned and left the kitchen, the weight of her words crushing him. Upstairs, he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Melissa didn't come up that night. He didn't hear her footsteps on the stairs or the creak of the mattress as she slid in beside him. For the first time in their marriage, Logan felt like a stranger in his own home. The following days were a blur of tension and silence. Logan felt like a man walking a tightrope, constantly on edge, trying to make sense of the disarray that had taken over his life. Melissa's behavior became even more erratic. She spent hours locked in her study, emerging only for brief meals or cryptic conversations that left him more confused than ever. But it was the children, Clara, 6, and Evan, 4, who worried Logan the most. Melissa was still attentive to them, but there was a peculiar detachment in her gaze when she read them bedtime stories or kissed them goodnight. Logan had tried to dismiss it as his imagination, but deep down, he knew something was very wrong. That Friday, Logan left work earlier than usual. The gnawing feeling in his gut had reached a fever pitch, and he decided he couldn't take it anymore. If Melissa was hiding something, he was going to find out. He'd confronted her 100 times in his mind, rehearsing what he would say, but nothing prepared him for what was about to unfold. The house was eerily quiet when Logan pulled into the driveway. Usually, he'd hear the distant hum of the television or the kids laughing, but today, the only sound was the faint rustle of leaves in the autumn wind. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him, and strained his ears for any sign of life. "Melissa," he called, his voice echoing through the stillness. No answer. His chest tightened as he made his way upstairs. The door to the master bedroom was ajar, and as he approached, he heard muffled voices and the sound of laughter. A man's laughter. Logan's heart slammed against his ribs. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to turn away, to leave before he saw something he couldn't unsee. But he forced himself forward, his hand trembling as he pushed the door open. The sight before him was like a dagger to his chest. Melissa was in their bed, her body tangled with Ethan's. The neighbor's smug grin froze the moment he noticed Logan standing there, his face a mask of shock and fury. Melissa gasped, clutching the sheet to cover herself, but her eyes held no remorse, only defiance. "Logan," she began, her voice breathless, but he cut her off. "Don't," he growled, his voice low and menacing. He felt his entire world collapse in that instant, rage and heartbreak colliding in a torrent of emotion. "Don't you dare say a word." Melissa sat up, her posture unrepentant despite the situation. "You don't understand, Logan. This isn't what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" Logan barked, his voice rising. "I come home early to find my wife in our bed with the damn neighbor, and you're going to stand there and insult my intelligence. What is this, Melissa? Some sick game?" She didn't flinch, her expression hardening. "The cards said this would happen," she said calmly, as though her betrayal could be justified with a deck of paper. "The cards?" Logan's laugh was hollow, filled with venom. "You're blaming this disgusting spectacle on your tarot cards? Are you even listening to yourself? You've lost your mind, Melissa. Don't you dare talk to me like that," she snapped, her composure cracking. "You don't know what I've been through. You don't know how trapped I've felt in this marriage. The cards helped me see the truth, that I deserve more." "More?" Logan's voice shook with fury. "So, more is Ethan, is that it? More is betraying your husband and destroying our family. Our kids are downstairs, for God's sake. What kind of mother are you?" At the mention of Clara and Evan, Melissa's defiance faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly regained her footing. "I'm still their mother," she said coldly. "And they'll understand one day. They'll see that I did this for all of us, for my happiness, and for theirs." Logan's vision blurred with tears of anger and pain. He took a step closer, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You're delusional, Melissa. This isn't about happiness, it's about selfishness. And I won't let you drag our kids down with you." Ethan finally spoke, his voice cautious. "Logan, man, maybe we should." "Get out," Logan snarled, his glare cutting through Ethan like a blade. "Get out of my house before I throw you out myself." Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second before scrambling out of the bed, grabbing his clothes and shoes in a clumsy rush. He shot a nervous glance at Melissa, but she didn't look at him. Her gaze was fixed on Logan, her jaw set. When Ethan was gone, Logan turned back to his wife. "This is over, Melissa," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside him. "I'm taking the kids, and I'm getting as far away from you as I can. You can keep your cards, your sage, and whatever twisted fantasies you've convinced yourself are real. But you won't poison Clara and Evan with this insanity." Melissa's eyes widened, genuine fear flickering across her face. "You can't take them, Logan. They're my children too." "They're our children," he said coldly. "But after this? You've forfeited the right to be their mother. You don't have the authority. Watch me." Logan's voice cut through hers like a knife. "I'll fight you in court if I have to. But I swear to God, Melissa, I'll do whatever it takes to protect them from you." She stared at him, her defiance wavering, and for the first time in weeks, Logan saw a glimpse of the woman he'd married, the woman who had once loved him, before everything fell apart. But it was too late. That woman was gone, consumed by whatever madness had taken root in Melissa's heart. "I'm taking our children away from you, you witch," Logan spat, the words sharp and final. He turned on his heel, walking out of the room without looking back. As he descended the stairs, he could hear Melissa's muffled sobs, but they didn't stir any sympathy in him. The only thing he felt now was resolve. His children would not grow up in the shadow of Melissa's chaos. And Logan would make sure of it. Logan stood in the living room, his hands trembling as he packed a suitcase for Clara and Evan. Each shirt, each toy he folded felt like another brick in the crumbling wall of his life. Upstairs, Melissa's muffled sobs echoed faintly, but he couldn't let himself care. His sole focus was on his children, getting them out of the chaos that had consumed their home. The front door opened, and Logan turned sharply to see his sister, Olivia, stepping inside. She had rushed over after his panicked call. Her face was lined with worry, but her presence brought a sense of grounding Logan desperately needed. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, taking in the disheveled state of the room and her brother's hollow expression. Logan shook his head. "No. I don't even know what okay means anymore." His voice was hoarse, his words brittle. Olivia stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're doing the right thing. The kids don't need to be around this. They need stability, Logan. You're the only one who can give it to them." "I have to get them out of here," Logan said, his voice trembling. "She's not stable. I don't even know who she is anymore. But the things she's doing, how she justifies it, I can't let Clara and Evan grow up thinking this is normal." The sound of footsteps on the stairs snapped both their gazes upward. Melissa appeared, her face pale and tear-streaked, her movements hesitant. She had draped herself in a robe, but the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. "Logan, please," she began, her voice shaking with desperation. "Don't do this. We can figure this out, for the kids. Don't take them away from me." Logan set the suitcase down and turned to face her. His shoulders squared, and his voice came out sharp, like a blade cutting through the tension. "Figure this out. Melissa, I walked in on you in our bed with Ethan. What exactly is there to figure out?" Melissa clutched the banister, her knuckles white. "You don't understand. The cards said this would happen. They said it was necessary." Logan blinked in disbelief. "The cards? Are you even listening to yourself? You've destroyed everything, our family, our home, and you want to blame it on a deck of cards? You've lost your damn mind." Melissa flinched, but her expression hardened. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. You have no idea how trapped I've felt, how empty I've been in this marriage. The cards helped me see the truth. I deserve more than this. More." Logan's voice cracked as anger surged through him. "You think you deserve more? What about your kids, Melissa? Did you think about them when you were sneaking around with Ethan? When you decided this so-called truth was worth throwing everything away?" Her voice rose, matching his intensity. "I am still their mother. I love them, and I will not let you take them from me." "You've already taken something from them," Logan snapped. "You've taken their stability, their trust, their innocence. You're so consumed with your awakening that you can't even see what you're doing to them." Melissa's lip quivered, but she didn't back down. "You don't get to decide what's best for them. They're my children too." "Not anymore," Logan said, his voice cold and unyielding. "Not after this. I'm taking them away, Melissa. Away from your chaos, your delusions. You can have your cards, your incense, your twisted fantasies. But you're not going to poison Clara and Evan." Tears streaked down Melissa's face, but her anger burned just as fiercely. "You'll have to fight me for them," she spat. "And I promise you, Logan, I'll make sure you regret it." Logan's jaw clenched as he turned to Olivia. "Help me get the kids' things into the car." "Logan, don't do this." Melissa's voice broke as she ran down the stairs, blocking his path. "Please. I'll change. I'll change." Logan interrupted, his voice filled with cold fury. "You're too far gone, Melissa. I'm taking our children away from you, you witch. The words cut through the air like a whip, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. Logan stepped around her, his resolve unshaken, while Olivia followed close behind, casting Melissa a sorrowful look. As Logan loaded the last suitcase into the car, he saw Clara and Evan peeking out from the living room, their faces filled with confusion and fear. His heart ached as he crouched down, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "Hey, kids," he said gently. "We're going to stay with Aunt Olivia for a little while, okay? Just an adventure." "Why isn't Mommy coming?" Clara asked, her voice small. Logan swallowed hard. "Mommy needs some time to herself. But don't worry. Everything's going to be fine." Clara nodded hesitantly, but Evan clung to Logan's arm, his little face buried in his shoulder. Logan held him close, his eyes stinging with unshed tears. This wasn't the life he wanted for his children. But it was the only way to protect them. As the car pulled out of the driveway, Melissa stood in the doorway, her figure silhouetted against the light. Logan didn't look back. He couldn't. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: this was only the beginning of the fight. And Logan would do whatever it took to keep his children safe. The next months passed like a trial by fire, each day more grueling than the last. The custody battle consumed Logan's every waking moment, dragging him into a labyrinth of court filings, hearings, and sleepless nights. Melissa fought tooth and nail, leveraging every resource she had to paint herself as a loving, misunderstood mother and Logan as a controlling, cold-hearted man. But Logan had a singular focus: Clara and Evan. He would endure anything to shield them from the chaos that Melissa had brought into their lives. It was during one of those endless court sessions that the tide finally turned. Bethany, Logan's sharp-eyed attorney, had managed to subpoena Melissa's phone records. The texts between Melissa and Ethan, laced with confessions of infidelity and plans to justify their actions through her spiritual awakening, were laid bare before the court. More damning still were the emails Melissa had sent to friends, bragging about how she planned to manipulate the situation to keep the kids while living her truth. Logan couldn't bear to look at Melissa as the evidence was read aloud. Every word was a nail in the coffin of the woman he had once loved. He forced himself to focus on Clara and Evan, who sat with Olivia in the back of the courtroom. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but their wide, anxious eyes reminded him why he had to see this through to the end. When the judge finally delivered her ruling, Logan felt the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. Full custody was awarded to him, with Melissa granted supervised visitation pending a psychological evaluation. The judge's words echoed in his mind, providing a measure of vindication: this court prioritizes the well-being of the children, and it is clear that their father provides the stability and safety they require. Melissa erupted in tears, pleading with the judge, but it was over. Logan didn't wait to hear more. He gathered his children, thanked Olivia and Bethany, and walked out of the courthouse, ready to start rebuilding their lives. The weeks that followed were quieter than Logan had imagined they'd be. For the first time in months, his home felt like a sanctuary. The laughter of Clara and Evan filled the halls again, and Logan made good on his promise to himself to be present for them. Bedtime stories, pancake breakfasts, and walks to the park became the rhythm of their new life. But peace was fleeting. One rainy evening, while Logan was tucking Clara into bed, the doorbell rang. He frowned, glancing at the clock. It was late for visitors. Leaving the kids upstairs, he went to the door and opened it cautiously. Melissa stood on the porch, soaked to the bone, her hair clinging to her face. Her eyes were wild, desperate, as if the past months had unraveled her completely. "Logan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I need to talk to you." He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "Melissa, you're not supposed to be here." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I had to see you. I had to see the kids." "You can see them during your scheduled visits," Logan said firmly. "That's the arrangement." "They need me," Melissa pleaded, clutching at his arm. "Logan, I've changed. I've started therapy. I've let go of the cards, the rituals, everything. I just want to be their mother again. Please." Logan stared at her, searching her face for the truth. He saw traces of the woman he had once loved, but the wounds she had inflicted were still fresh, too raw to ignore. It's not about me, Melissa. It's about them. And right now, they need stability. They need safety. You have to prove that you're capable of giving them that. I can prove it, she said quickly, her voice breaking. Just give me a chance. Logan exhaled, his shoulders sagging. Melissa, I'll never stop you from being their mother. But they deserve better than the person you've been. If you're serious about changing, then show it. Not to me, to them. Her tears fell harder, but she nodded, stepping back into the rain. I'll show you, she whispered. I'll show all of you. Months turned into a year. Melissa kept to her word, undergoing therapy and adhering to the court's requirements. Logan cautiously allowed more visitation time, slowly rebuilding a semblance of trust. Though he doubted they'd ever be friends again, they found a way to coexist for the sake of their children. One crisp autumn afternoon, Logan sat on a park bench, watching Clara and Evan play on the swings. Olivia sat beside him, sipping coffee and laughing at one of Clara's antics. For the first time in what felt like forever, Logan felt a sense of peace. You're doing good, you know, Olivia said, nudging him. They're happy. You're happy. Logan nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. It hasn't been easy. But it's worth it. For them. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting the park in a golden glow, Logan realized something. The darkness Melissa had brought into their lives had nearly consumed him, but it hadn't won. He'd fought for his children, for their future, and for himself. And in the end, they'd all come out stronger. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it was a life worth living. And that was enough.